Hello, cooking enthusiasts. This week's video is all about utilizing the homemade pasta that I made in the last video. I realize that a lot more people than usual are trying to make their own pasta, so these are two simple recipes for utilizing them. But of course, you can also use these recipes as inspiration for working with store-bought pasta as well, if you have some. Both of these recipes are very simple and they center around canned tomatoes, which are, of course, an excellent staple to always have on hand. The first dish is a vodka sauce, or in this case, essentially a fettuccine alla vodka. We started with probably a little bit too much olive oil to fry off the garlic, and then incorporated the tomatoes. I believe some versions of this dish actually only use tomato paste as the tomato product, so that is a potential option if you have that. We decided to simply use a portion of canned tomatoes crushed up and give them a decent amount of time to reduce. At this stage, I also added a little bit of dried basil and, of course, vodka. In this case, a jalapeno vodka that I got for Christmas last year. You can use really any type of vodka or neutral spirit. You just want a little bit of alcohol to help solubilize some of the flavor compounds in the tomatoes. But in this case, the slight amount of flavor in this vodka worked out. For me, I let the sauce pretty much get to the final stage because, again, I was working with freshly made pasta that I then froze. So for me, the pasta took probably literally like 1 minute to 90 seconds to actually boil and then got finished in the sauce. And then the actual finishing touch, a little bit of homemade creme fraiche. Again, it's probably more traditional to add a splash of just regular cream and or butter and cheese. But at the time, I was actually out of fresh cream, so this creme fraiche actually worked really nicely. The next recipe I did is a little more interesting to me. I made a version of Amatriciana, which is a very old school classic pasta dish, normally made with spaghetti or a similar shape. The most basic version of the dish is guanciale, onions, and tomatoes. Relatively frequently, there's red pepper flakes, sometimes a splash of red wine, sometimes garlic, but those first three ingredients are really the key. I went for a fairly traditional approach, but I did make a few modifications. Again, the traditional is guanciale, and I believe pancetta is often substituted, so I was using my homemade pig face pancetta, which is sort of in between those two options. To make sure everything was tender, I cooked a big piece of pancetta sous vide first for roughly 24 hours. I then cooled it down and later used some of the fattier pieces from the pancetta to render down and use as the fat for the dish. One of the advantages of this is that it contained some of the solidified sous vide bag juices, and once the fat rendered, all of this stuff browned, and it almost became like brown butter, but pork fat. I then reserved a few tablespoons of just the fat, and then to the pot added thinly sliced white onion. This was cooked down at a low temperature. I wanted the onions just soft and sweet, but not caramelized. I then added most of a can of tomatoes, and my final little adjustment, fermented golden plums, as a way to sort of replace a splash of white wine. If you have any sort of vinegar, kombucha, other sort of fermented fruit or vegetable that is anywhere in the category of a white wine flavor profile, I really recommend adding a little bit to a tomato sauce. And my final non-traditional step, I blended everything to create a smooth texture and emulsify all of that pancetta fat directly into the sauce. And as you can see in the footage, with that step done ahead of time, we just needed to crisp up some additional pancetta, add a little bit of black pepper and a little bit of chili flakes, and finally boil off our pasta and toss it with a little bit of sauce. There was plenty of extra sauce to put in the freezer, and the final dish was really excellent and well balanced. It's really a masterclass in balance because the tomato is sweet, savory, and acidic, and then the other ingredients are enhancing all of those aspects. So I really recommend giving some version of this dish a try. You need some sort of fatty cured protein, tomatoes, onions, something acidic, and pasta. I hope these recipes were interesting and inspiring. If you have any questions about them or about cooking in general, feel free to leave a comment. Otherwise, thank you for watching.